Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 62 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game up to the next level. I am Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
You know, I'm just getting back to the table here because I actually stepped away. We're going to do something a little different today. We'll see if it works out.
Doing our own sound engineering is always fun.
Yeah, always fun. always fun. So, hello, everyone out there in MixLR land. We appreciate you always joining the show, and hope you guys continue to do that because we love having live audiences. It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
And speaking of live audience, I want to give a big shout out and I love you to my sweetums, Sean. Today is his birthday.
Well, happy birthday, Sean. I'm so glad you're out there, too.
So I love you. I love being with you. I love that you're a part of my life. And here's to many more.
Yeah, definitely. Here. We actually have drinks today. So
Cheers.
We'll just a little clinking. And a little drinking.
All right.
So that being said, we have a show spotlight.
We do.
And, going over this, it went from, we're going to have to talk about a lot, to, holy crap, we're going to have to talk about a lot.
So, the system spotlight today is on White Wolf's World of Darkness. And for those of you who know why this is such an expansive topic, because the game has gone through many editions, many releases, re-releases, ups and downs, and controversies, and there's a billion different settings for it. Like, it's not just one game, it's like a multitude of games that kind of make a... almost like the MCU has done the cinematic universe. They've got their own, game universe. And, luckily, I think, in amongst all that, the release of the game itself really shook up the tabletop role-playing system because it was so new and so different at the time, and it was such a phenomenon.
I guess, stepping away from all of it and looking back at it from our perspective here, I didn't realize really when it hit and how it hit. Until I started looking, and I'll honestly say this, and watching some of the documentary. And I'm going to say this. If you were ever, in any way, a fan of World of Darkness, whether it's Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, Wraith the...
I mean, you can keep going, but there's too many to list.
Yeah, so if you were ever part of that, and or in the goth scene that was kind of attached to it, or LARPing it, and you have Amazon Prime, look it up. It's
called World of Darkness.
Yeah, and it's a really good documentary. I think it does it justice.
I didn't know it existed until last night, and Rob and I got on Discord together, and we're just kind of talking to finalize our notes for the show today. And he's like, "So I was watching the documentary," and I'm like, "I'm sorry, you were what now?
You what now?
you what, mate? Are you having a giggle there?"
Yeah, but seriously, I think one of the best parts about it for me was actually seeing some of the art splashed up on the screen. And I was like, damn, that is so telling. It took me right back to the first time I turned pages in that book.
I know.
And honestly, realistically for me, Werewolf wasn't the first for me. Or, sorry, Vampire was not the first for me, Werewolf was. And then I kind of figured out they were all connected.
Yeah, okay.
And it was really neat. It was different. And it was something that I didn't expect. But the timing for when it came out truly was so telling. When you have... I mean, it was birthed right around 1990.
Yeah, 1991
right.
was when first edition Vampire came
so
out.
Gen Con 1990 was when the group known as White Wolf was actually putting it together. And White Wolf before that was it was like a magazine. It was like a zine that was just two brothers writing it out of their house and photocopying it at wherever they could until they produced it into something real, like a magazine, even before the game came out.
Yep.
But it was just stories. It was collections of information and other content that they had. But White Wolf as a system that became Vampire is all that we can kind of think of right now. So that they already were telling stories well before it. They were already coming up with ideas and things that were outside of this genre. And it wasn't until 1990 when the idea basically hit them
They were driving through Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana, the urban blight that is there.
Yeah, I mean, it was, in all honesty, it was the Rust Belt that died.
Yeah.
And just was left to urban decay.
Yeah.
And any of the movies that are post-apocalyptic, it looks just like that.
We live in Detroit. You don't got to explain Rust Belt urban decay to me, And, just looking at that and going, who would even live here?
Right.
And somebody said vampires.
And it exploded from that.
Yeah, and they were like, "Oh, holy crap! What if we made a game based around you being the vampire?"
Right.
Like,
and at
what
the
stories
time,
would you tell?
Vampires were monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you fought vampires. There was no
you hunted
concept.
them for treasure in D&D. Yeah.
Right. There was no concept of you becoming one.
Mm-hmm.
And now there was this. And then behind all of that, at the same time, you had kind of the punk goth subculture.
Yeah.
That was out there, that was clubbing, that was kind of new, and people were getting attached to it. And now you had these two cultures. You had the nerd culture that was already ridiculed and left to the side, and you had the goth culture that was ridiculed and set to the side, suddenly kind of having a common interest.
Yeah.
And it got really powerful.
Yeah.
And exploded very quickly. Between 1991 and I would say 1995, it became a predominant system that communicated role-playing.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I knew anybody who didn't play Vampire by 1998.
Or at least hadn't played it once.
And I would say, I dare say probably by 96, it had infiltrated every facet of my group. Yeah.
And I'll honestly say that I knew more people who LARPed Vampire than any other LARP.
See, I didn't get into LARPing until I went to Michigan State in 98.
All right.
But yeah, I went up there and people were like, "Oh, dude, if you're going to hang out with this dude, you got to check out this Vampire LARP. You roleplay, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course you have roleplay." And okay, yeah, definitely drop by the Vampire LARP. You're going to love it.
I mean, and it opened up a whole different level of, I need to buy more clothes, which was not something words ever uttered by a gamer. It was like a gaming shirt or something, which was still rare. But now you have to buy clothes. I mean, one color, don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But,
no.
it gave us an image into a world as gamers that we don't normally see. The idea, and I will flat out say this, the idea of a tabletop gamer going to the club was not a thing. It just...
Oh, yeah.
Those two things. But now you had an image of what that looked like.
Right.
What does the club scene look like? Well, turn to page 65 in the, Vampire book, and, well, that's pretty much it right there.
Well, hell, even if you knew some of the goth crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, because I did. And so there were people who were like, "Hey, let's go downtown to City Club."
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And
for those of you who are a little older,
walls all painted black, goth industrial music,
shitty, don't go to the bathroom kind of situation.
Yeah, sort of situation in downtown Detroit, and I think it's still that way, kind of. But
I don't think it's changed at all.
I don't think it's changed at all. But after you go there and you run into people from your Vampire LARP at the club, and you're like, I didn't think I was cool enough to walk in here, and I'm running into my gaming buddies,
Exactly. I mean, I will say that it, the other thing that it did was, I remember sitting at a table, I think we were at a coffee house, talking about gaming, and someone's just like, "Hey, you guys going to be playing, you guys doing Vampire, you're going to do Vampire with that group?" And I was just like, "Yeah, Mark's going to be running a game." And literally, a table away from us was a girl in all black, who was just sitting there with one of her friends, kind of gothy, but her friend was way more gothy, literally turned and looked over and said, "You guys play Vampire?" And we're like, "Yeah, and we don't look at all the same."
Yeah.
And that conversation would never have been broached. And she literally walked over and she was like, "Hey, we're looking for a group." And I'm like, "Really?" And the first thing that ran through my mind is the same thing that goes through my mind right now. Geeks just met girls.
Yeah.
I mean, that was Vampire.
That was the other big thing. It brought gender parity to gaming in a large way there.
Well, one of the key things that I thought was neat about Vampire and Werewolf, the whole White Wolf thing, was race, sex, didn't matter.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
That wasn't even in there.
Everybody
it was just
vampires.
Something you write in, but
sure.
Everybody's a vampire. Everybody's a werewolf. Everybody's a mage. You didn't have you had some cultural centers where certain things were more prevalent, or a style of something was more prevalent, but it wasn't like all of the mages lived in India,
right.
And all the werewolves lived in Germany, and all of the vampires lived in New York or Atlanta or whatever, or even to the state of the degree that all the Ravenos were in Yugoslavia. Like,
Yeah.
no, that wasn't how it was at all. I mean, yeah, you had secting of groups based on blood or based on the type you were, whether you were a glasswalker or whatever as a werewolf.
Right, but it takes all kinds.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so it opened a lot more doors. It took diversity to a totally different level.
Yep.
And you had demeanors that were kind of accustomed to a Ventru, you know, or to a Ravenous or a Nosferatu. But they weren't facts.
Yeah.
You didn't have to play your character snooty.
Right.
Or
right.
decrepit or whatever. Even if you were a Malcave, which were known for being insane. You didn't have to drive, or you didn't have to walk around like the Joker, you know, or some, you know, or a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of person.
Yeah, my long-standing Malk was a masochist.
Exactly. You had
Perfectly functional.
You had all of these different realms within them, and that really made for better character development. Like, you had a whole book that I take that back. You had a whole system that was basically generated around the fact of, you are a unique individual. Here is an entire series of books to help you make a better character for who they are. Not necessarily, I mean, yeah, powers were involved in the process, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But there were pages devoted to flaws
No?
and issues and other things that made up who you were more than what you were.
Right.
And it was a so different way to look at things. And that was a major part for me for World of Shadows as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, you know, it's gone through so many different iterations, too. And not only just Vampire, but then, you know, off of that, they kind of started spinning the whole World of Darkness thing. You ended up with, like you were listing them before, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, Changeling the Dreaming, Wraith the Oblivion, Hunter the Reckoning, Demon the Fallen, and Mummy the Resurrection. And that was just in the first World of Darkness.
The classic.
The classic.
The classic is...
Yeah.
We're going to separate a little bit here because
there's some history here.
There's some history, but effectively we'll cut it to the short, and that is there was we'll go with two major editions. There was a classic version that basically ended in 2004.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I think that was the date.
That sounds right.
Don't kill me on that one. Because they actually set an end.
Yeah,
an end to it.
A lot of their plot lines for the various stories were having to do with the coming of the end times, essentially, and that's the reason the World of Darkness was dark in the first place, is because essentially we were on the precipice of the apocalypse.
Right, and they had a term for it, and they had
Gehenna was the term for vampires, but it was different for every sect, but they all kind of had the end is coming sort of thing.
Right. And so when that end came, they wrote a book for it. They had published it, and that was the close.
Yeah.
And then it was 2011 they released a new effectively like a new series with new blood, and it was a different system a little bit.
Yeah.
Math-wise, I will say that. And then a second edition of that came out later.
Yeah, they found the first edition of the New World of Darkness
Right.
was not being well received.
Right.
Because it had changed some fundamental things about how the game worked. And the not just game mechanics, but like the fundamental feel of it. Very much like how 4th edition D&D turned off a lot of players because it felt video gamey almost. Very rote in form, like you just had these moves you did and didn't really focus a lot on the role play. New World of Darkness First Edition had the same issue to it. Chronicles of Darkness is what they called it. Right. The Chronicles of Darkness had kind of the same issue. And so they took that step back. And they kind of reinvented them a lot of things. They revised some things, and they put out second edition Chronicles of Darkness games. Vampire the Requiem. They had rebranded certain things. Yeah. So primarily what we're going to be talking about, though, is going to be the classic World of Darkness. Yep. I have not actually, in the interest of disclosure, have not actually played any of the Chronicles of Darkness New World of Darkness stuff.
I stepped into one game, but did not get exceptionally far in it. And for the most part, I felt that there was a lot of that it was hard for me stepping from classic to the new one, because of how much history and depth that was in it. Very much like how I had a hard time between 7th Sea First Edition and Second Edition.
Yeah.
It was very similar to that.
Fundamental shift in tone.
Yeah, but not complete. I think they still tried to embody a lot of the classic feel of it. And it does come off, but they also tried to explain what changed. Like why things were different, and I think that was a struggle within itself. So, now that being said,
right.
We're going to focus on the classic,
right,
and the general feel.
But at the same time, I think the things that translate between one to the other does not matter if you're playing Chronicles of Darkness or World of Darkness, but you're still going to have very much the same feel for the story. The sort of moods and themes and such like that it did not change. And I think a lot of the core mechanics are pretty universal across White Wolf properties. Even extending into things like the Aeonverse that I love, the Aberrant, Adventure, and Trinity.
Yes.
Where you're still going to have a lot of the same mechanics. Things are rolled off of D10s, etc., etc. So as we discuss game mechanics, understand that this is pretty universal.
Okay. I agree with that. So let's talk about when I think of World of Darkness, I think of a gothic punk soap opera.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way of putting it.
Because it is art, it is style, it is a world where there is no definition of good or evil. Everything is very gray. Everyone has agendas. Yet there is a deep society. There's tragedy everywhere.
Yeah.
And things are falling apart.
Yeah.
It is post-apocalyptic without being post-apocalyptic.
Well, it's not post-apocalyptic. It's pre-apocalyptic. Is the thing, and that's I think what you need to really understand about the setting is that not just pre-apocalyptic as in it hasn't happened yet,
right?
But it's about to happen, and
anyone of note knows it's happening.
Yeah, the signs are all there, and that's very much the feel of it. But at the same time, though, it's a drastic shift in feel and playstyle from something like Dungeons and Dragons, where D&D is very much based around your adventuring day. You're going to keep track of your equipment. You're going to keep track of your spells. You're going to keep track of hit points. Your moves are going to be very tactical and ordered. You've got a strict initiative order, and you're going to have a move, an action, a bonus action, etc. Things are very structured, and you even play it with miniatures on a grid oftentimes. You can play it Theaters of the Mind Eye, but the rules lend themselves very much to being played with some sort of physical representation.
I'll be honest, I never did. Not a single time. Everything was theater of mind's eye.
No, I mean with D&D.
Oh, yes.
But in comparison...
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you already jumped.
But in comparison...
Yeah.
Theater of the Mind... It was very... very freeform, very
exceptionally
dramatic. And given the things that were on the market at the time, this was a dramatic move for what people used to know as role-playing games,
Yeah, the idea of having everyone in a weird way a spellcaster. Like, as far as the D&D, you could always do something unique and supernatural and different, move through shadows or fog or affect someone's mind that wasn't ESP.
Or throw a car at someone.
Or move at hyperspeed or do something like that. Like, all of that was very freeform, but at the same time, there were challenges to doing all of that. And for the first time, I think, in most systems, the system was against the player. The odds really weren't in the player's favor.
Yeah, the system itself, especially in first edition, Vampire, was really harsh. So I think before we get into this discussion, we should explain what the system is, and how it works, like from a numbers and dice standpoint. So gameplay in White Wolf games typically involve you'll have 9 attributes. This will be 3 physical attributes, 3 mental attributes, and 3 social attributes. Physical attributes being your strength, dexterity, and stamina. Your mental attributes being perception, intelligence, and... not manipulation. Perception, intelligence, and... I'm not thinking of it right now. Somebody's going to be yelling at me.
You got to wait, a couple more
I've
seconds.
got to wait
for it
10
catch...
seconds to catch up for us in the live chat. But then your social stats were things like appearance, manipulation, and
charisma. No,
something like that. But anyways,
we should pull up a character sheet. It'd be funny.
You have these attributes. Okay.
Yeah.
And then underneath there you have, I think, there's probably 30 some skills.
Yeah.
I want to say on average. Most of them are universal between systems like firearms and brawl and computers and such like that. History, but some of them are setting specific. That will have to do with dealing with things within the certain setting. So, for instance, in Changeling, there's a skill called kenning, which is essentially dealing your knowledge and lore of the Changeling setting itself.
Right.
Which, of course, doesn't appear on anybody else's character sheets because they have no reason to have that skill.
Exactly.
But so that's pretty universal, and even like I said, even if you bleed into something like Aberrant or Adventure, those are your White Wolf, things. So what you're typically going to do in any contest is take your attribute plus your skill, and those will be rated anywhere between 1 to 5 each. So you may have only 2 dice, you may have as many as 10 dice. It all rolls 10-sided dice. You'll roll that many 10-sided dice according to what your total was. And then typically on a 7 or up, it's counted as a success. And so you'll count individual successes rather than tallying a total of the numbers.
Right. And in a lot of ways, this system is very close to 7C as well. In the sense that you have attributes that are dotted and then skills that are dotted, and the dots equal dice. That you're rolling. The difference in the difference with this is that it's cumulative to create a total. Yeah, and then once you roll, you still have to reach a success point. So certain dice don't necessarily equal a success.
Right. So a simple task might only take 1 or 2 successes on your entire dice pool. You might only have to have 1 or 2 7s or higher come up.
Correct.
But for something much more difficult, you may need upwards of 5 or 6, or maybe it's even an ongoing test where every turn you need to have a certain minimum threshold, or over a certain amount of turns, maybe 5 turns, you have to accumulate a total of 20.
Right. Likewise, you have things like a 1, which takes away a success.
Yep.
And then you have 10s, which grant more.
Sometimes count as
Not
2
always.
successes.
Not always.
Under certain circumstances.
But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily give you a higher chance of success. I mean, realistically, you're going for a 7, 8, 9, or 10. And on the other side, it's not that you just didn't make those. One of those other options is you remove one.
Yeah. And that's I think really where like first edition Vampire really started. Like it really pitted the rules against you because I was never 100% on how the math worked out on it, but people smarter than me who understood probability better than me.
I will flat out say go into the discussion, look at Overwatch's comments. I think he does a good job of kind of breaking it down in simple terms. It's in the general discussion.
Oh, okay.
From yesterday
on Discord. Yeah.
I think it's a really good way that he broke it down because he if anyone, he's got the numbers in his mind for it.
About how at a certain threshold, it's not worth it to throw more dice because you actually end up increasing the chances of failure.
Correct.
At a certain rate.
Right, but like all good like all good characters and players, blow on the dice, put them through your special thing. Kiss your lucky dice. Only take your lucky dice.
Right. Only roll the purple ones.
This is where it really mattered.
Yep.
Like we had our dice for this game because if they touched the dice of the other game, ones could come up.
We had a fun situation when we were playing online one time, where a mutual friend of ours, had an ability where she was playing a vampire, and could shift out of essentially the ethereal realm, the Shadowlands.
Shadowlands in this one, okay.
So she could walk around in the Shadowlands and then essentially ambushed somebody with a katana and rolled a critical success, 8 successes on the attack roll or something like that.
Right.
And because ones subtracted from your successes, rolled something like -3 on the damage roll.
Okay.
The storyteller went, "That's ridiculous. I didn't see that roll. Roll it again." And rolled -2 this time on the damage roll.
So definitely contact was made.
Because White Wolf.
Because White Wolf. So the attack was successful, but there was no damage. So how does a story reconcile something like that?
It was a perfectly laid blow that the person dodged by sheer happenstance.
Okay.
It was a drunken master moment for the opponent.
Gotcha.
That she ended up just dealing no damage on.
Yeah.
So.
See, I could see it as the attack was successful but did no damage, as in it slid under their armpit and they carried through with it and moved beyond. So you think you were a masterful attack.
Yep.
And if they basically, I would have given them a chance to bluff it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm so hurt, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, but White Wolf produced results like that sometimes,
I would say more times than not.
More times than not,
honestly. Yeah. I mean, we were talking about it a little bit about the feel. Like, if this was your first game and you were playing White Wolf for what it was, and you're sitting at the table, like, are you expecting at the end of that session to feel like a hero, to feel like you accomplished things, to feel like you defeated the monster, or are you going to feel like a typical goth where you're depressed because? Yeah, you might have done something, but
it almost lends itself to a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I think I can't tell if it was good design or not to have done that, but the system kind of fights you, So you've got this world of darkness where tragedy is abound, everything is falling apart. We're on the precipice of the apocalypse itself, and and the system itself is making you fail. So, again, I don't know if that's good design or not, but it ends up producing stories where crappy things happen to good people who are giving it an honest try.
Honestly, I would say it does. Like, for me, it leans into what it really is like, what is expected out of that universe. Mm-hmm. I mean, 7th definitely leans into its heroics.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, it is hard to fail in what you're doing at 7th. You really got to try, or you've got to say, I'm failing. Much like Mouse Guard, you've got to actively fail.
Yeah.
I mean, you can not succeed in an amazing way, or have severe consequences for your actions.
You might not get the outcome you expect.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And even D&D, to a degree, is basically not you'll never roll to a failure. Especially in 5th edition. There's no one failure. Like, that's one thing that I find interesting is when you have Old Guard sitting at the table playing D&D 5th edition and someone rolls a 1 and they wince.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, it doesn't mean anything anymore. They're like, but it's a 1.
But it's a critical fail. No, there's no such thing. There's no critical fail rule, dude.
Right.
It's okay, chill out.
Where it's just like, oh, you played old D&D? No, I played Vampire. Oh, dude, do you need to take a walk?
Oh, right. Do you need a hug right now?
Yeah, like, I rolled 6 dice and there were 3 1s. Do you need to walk? Do you need to walk that off? Because you're okay. It's just 1s. They're just 1s. In fact, there are stats there are things and abilities that will make those 1s turn into 2s.
Rob's over here, laughs in 7th C.
Exactly.
Just ignore the 1s.
Just ignore them.
Just ignore them. Just take the 10s instead.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is that the system literally pushes you into that feeling of, oh, crap.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to me today?
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at it by today's standards, and there's a lot of people who can compare this to a lot of stories. Mm-hmm. You look at Constantine, and I can't think of how many times Constantine basically in his stories was just like, shit, what's happening today?
Right.
Like, okay, guys, great, I'm getting my ass kicked again. Who are you again?
What's that John Mulaney quote? You ever have one of those days where you just think to yourself, this might as well happen?
I mean, but that to a degree is what White Wolf was about.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it made for really neat stories.
But it's not just about getting kicked while you're down. It's just about trying your best and fighting that good fight when you're a monster. When you know that you are the thing that goes bump in the night. How do you deal with that?
What kind of stories do you write in those worlds?
How do you struggle against your your attempts to retain your humanity when you've got this beast inside of you that demands blood?
Right. Or I'm a mage. I am unbelievable at my craft. I can literally turn you into a martini glass and your hat into an olive and sit down and enjoy it. But at the same time, I am equally as screwed as anyone else trying to do that and can literally fold myself into oblivion. Mm-hmm. Because I screwed up and the world said, No.
And I mean, not only that, but you've got your other people who are essentially trying to bring about the apocalypse.
Yeah.
In Mage itself, which is a long story. But actually, I think that's a great segue, though, into one of my other favorite features about the World of Darkness, though.
Go on.
And that is, and we've talked about games that have rules written in them that enhance the setting. That make the setting come out in the rules.
Yes.
So I think one of the things we mentioned during that particular discussion was 7th Sea with their the bloodline magics and the drama dice and such like that are all very expressions of what the game wants you to be doing.
Yes, very much so.
White Wolf was arguably the first people I think to ever really do this.
I would agree. I would totally agree.
And
at least to the mainstream eye.
Right. So, I mean, we discussed basically the core sort of rules that take place in all White Wolf games. But when you get into the particulars of it, so Vampire, particularly, you would have a blood stat. It's your blood pool. And you would use your blood then to feed your... you could use it to heal wounds. You could use it to power certain of your vampiric disciplines. Disciplines were another thing. Those were your special vampire powers of like super speed, super strength, the ability to turn into animals or whatever. There were multitudinous and there's explanations for all of them.
Of course.
But all of these were specific vampire rules that made it easier and better and more immersive to play a vampire. And when I said your struggle against humanity, to retain your humanity, that's an actual stat.
Yeah, that's
on
in
your
there.
sheet,
Yeah.
So, I mean, losing your humanity is not just a storytelling aspect, but also a stat that you could diminish by doing monstrous, calloused acts.
Yeah. Which, and again, the idea of a monstrous or callous act was not something that was decided by the storyteller alone. There were kind of rules in the system designed around what that was.
There were thresholds of virtue, essentially, where if you did something below this mark and your humanity was higher than that, you had to make a check.
Yeah.
To see if your character was actually okay with that.
Yeah.
And if they were okay with that, they dropped their humanity score.
Right.
Because if you can do something like that and still rationalize it, then you're slipping, buddy.
Exactly.
You're turning into the monster.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where the whole mood and theme of Vampire came in, where it was a personal struggle of personal horror.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like to be this feral beast?
Gauging yourself between you and the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right there. It wasn't about experience. It wasn't about becoming something greater. It was about fighting the daily balance between them.
Yep.
And that daily balance got harder and harder every time you played.
Yep. And that was just Vampire.
Yeah.
So then you get into some of the other settings though, and the feel changed. Like you all still had the same World of Darkness, the same edge of apocalypse sort of feeling. But all the different genres had their own all the individual books, the systems.
Right.
We call them genres in our setting. I'm not sure if that's the right
It really isn't even setting.
word for it, but that's just what I grew up calling them.
Go with it. Go with it.
So all the different subgenres had their own kind of feel for how they were fighting the apocalypse. So you had like Werewolf the Apocalypse were these like feral creatures that were actually born of Gaia, of Mother Earth, and they were supposed to be these woodland protectors essentially that were these ultimate fighting beasts, so that when the forces of technology and evil and corruption and such like that leaked into our system, she had a fighting force to essentially maintain the wild and beat those things back to maintain the balance. And so a lot of theirs have to do with glory and honor. There's a stat called Gnosis, which is your spiritual bond, essentially. They can walk openly in the spirit world, things like that. So there were all game mechanics written into your werewolves for these things. Yeah. Also, there was rage.
Oh, yeah.
The moon was a big, obviously for werewolves, it was a huge thing. And then, how that affected your shape shifting and whatnot. all sorts of different rules to enhance that feel. Mage. Mage was all about wonder.
Yeah.
And it was all about creating your own reality, because that's what mages were.
But at the same time, balancing it with reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you couldn't break reality to a point.
Right.
Or reality would tell you you went too far.
You had a stat called paradox, which is when reality said, okay, I call BS.
Yeah.
And slaps you back for trying to alter it with one of your spells.
You're not a cartoon character.
Uh-huh.
Welcome to reality.
Yeah, I see you flying, but gravity's actually a real thing, so why don't we talk about that down here?
Yeah, how are you doing that again?
Mm-hmm.
You wanna try and explain me? And I think you said it best, or said it. And it
Mage is a game of how well you can BS your storyteller.
Exactly, and how much your storyteller really accepts the feels of reality. And I feel like sometimes the best storytellers weren't so much rules lawyers as they were finite mechanics of reality.
Yeah.
Like, okay, explain it to me. And some of the best players in Mage weren't necessarily heavy character development people.
It was the people who could be subtle enough to slip their spell work past reality.
Correct. Like, and I will flat out say, some things in the Mage book made that a lot easier. They explained it very cleanly of like, oh, I'm a magician. So I can pull rabbits from hats because that's acceptable within the magical circles.
Right. You believe that magicians can pull rabbits from hats. Ergo, I can get away with doing this right in front of you.
Right. You know, and so that made it. Or the Technocracy, which was a group of techno-mages, effectively, who basically were BSing everything they did with technology as like a guise, but not really.
Well, those were the bad guys, and that's a much longer story.
Well, regardless of good or bad, but that was
basically
in the way.
they were doing magic and putting it in the form of technology, and then putting that into society, so society would accept their magic as reality.
Yeah, and they did. I mean, well, they did or they didn't was based on your roles. More than anything else.
But the point being, though, is that every one of these subsystems of the greater world of darkness had their own game mechanics built in on top of the layer of standard White Wolf mechanics that enhanced the feel of the game, enhanced the character in the place of it, that you're not going to get out of a system like GURPS or out of Fate or something like that that's very generic. You can describe a lot of things with that. And arguably White Wolf could have gone that way. Of taking a core rule system and then using that one core rule system to explain the different character types, but they didn't. They took it that extra step and made rules for vampires, rules for werewolves.
Well, and I think I think this is I would say arguably, but with a strong degree, it helped. A lot of White Wolf leaned hard on character creation, background development, and specifically personal growth within the story, so that the storyteller had a reason on your sheet to have a discussion with you. And that wasn't something that came along, especially not at that time, but it leaned hard into, okay, this is a terrible setting in a tragic world that is on the edge of destruction. Great. That makes wonderful characters. No. I'm going to go a little further. You as a vampire are suffering. And to determine your suffering, you have virtue and humanity. And that helps you understand what you're suffering. Oh, okay. So now I can define how that happens on a moment-to-moment basis with my storyteller. Or I'm a mage, and not only is the world sucking, and I know there's these people trying to tear it apart, but at the same time, every day I'm struggling to make sure that reality stays there while I play with it.
Yeah. And you don't stack up too much paradox and end up,
Or as a werewolf, I'm here to protect everything and during this complete chaos that I know is coming to a close because Mother Earth tells me so, but at the same time, I have to keep myself in check at the same time as be honorable to my brothers and sisters. That gives you role-playing. That forces you into it at every step of the game while you're growing, every role you make. And arguably, that was nowhere in any other system at that time.
I mean, the closest thing you could even say to that was like D&D's alignment system, but even that doesn't even hold the barest flicker of a candle.
Well, not
to
only
some of the systems
like
that they built in here.
it didn't affect your rolls on a moment to moment basis. The only thing that it really affected was a few spells and how they affected you.
I mean, I think what it really comes down to, and this was mentioned very heavily in the documentary that we watched, was, and this is kind of when they were talking about how it brought gender parity to the gaming scene, was because the D&D world that was the predominant game at the time was really a boys' club, because it was a very strategy, very hack and slash. We don't care, just go in, conquer, get treasure, you know, sort of numbers-based system, and that didn't really appeal to a lot of female gamers. But then when you had White Wolf came out with World of Darkness with Vampire, now you had a far more focus on story. On emotion, and these are things
on relationships,
and these are all things that the female crowd found that they were able to get into a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, using terminology like sires, this is your sire, this is your primogen. These are people that you don't necessarily trust implicitly because they're not family, but they are family. In a sense, you're trusting them at a blood level, and yet in some cases they are closer to you than family.
Yeah.
They know you better than family. They can find you. They can feel you. They can read your thoughts at times. And so in that, you have these bonds, this closeness, this kismet that comes out of that. And then that was explored by all kinds of movies afterward, and TV shows and things like that. They kind of took that and ran with it hard.
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean,
for better or worse.
We could talk about where the origins of where Underworld got 90% of its information from,
and the ensuing lawsuit.
Regardless, you can say that all of that feel and emotion and drive came out that way, and it really did draw a lot of people in. And it was beautiful, and it brought people to gaming that
absolutely
wouldn't have been there, and then opened up the avenues of, well, if I can do this, then I could totally simplify these rules in a totally different world and setting, and keep that idea that character forward, that the character's involvement is more important than the story. The story is merely a guiding premise to ride this character's truths and story out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have total games that are that direction. So
I do want to just briefly, because I know we've listed kind of a lot of these, but but there is a lot of them. It's like the old World of Darkness. So we started off with Vampire. Obviously, we've got Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, which is all about reality bending, essentially.
Oh, dude.
Changeling.
We haven't even talked about Changeling.
Jeez. Changeling the Dreaming. For those of you who like stories about the Fae, the summer and winter courts, and
you want the complete history of the Fae? Go grab yourself Changeling and keep grabbing books until, what, probably 10 years from now?
Seelie and Unseelie Fae, fairies and stuff like that, and all stories of inspiration and childlike wonder, kind of.
Mixed with...
In a dying world. Where do you find... When you're powered from dreams, where do you find that in a dying world?
And how bad are the nightmares?
Right, exactly.
And the nightmares are pretty bad.
Because nightmares are dreams, too.
Yeah.
But
also, I'd have to flat out say this, and anybody who's here will remember this. If you knew somebody who had all of the Changeling books... Oh,
they fit together so nice on their shelf.
The spines of the Changeling were not very thick, but they made a beautiful tapestry. From end to end if you had all of them. And I've been lucky enough to know a few people who've had them and been like, oh, that's what it looks like. Because from one at a piece, you're not sure what it's going to look like.
Yes.
But it was great that they had that so that you could look at it on your shelf and be like, that is Changeling. I mean, from literally 5 feet away, I know when someone has Changeling.
I'm sure you know our mutual friend right down the road here.
Yeah, right down the road.
right down the road.
Right down the road.
Has all those in her library.
Yes.
So,
yes.
She was the one who introduced me to Changeling.
Yeah.
There was Wraith the Oblivion, which I thought was a good system but a bad setting.
Well, I mean, I could say that like Paranoia is a character creation system in a terrible setting.
Well.
But Wraith did the same thing, where it was like, it was really hard, like you were saying earlier, we were talking about it, and Wraith was an amazing design because of personal stories, your character creation and guide has to be very strong for that.
It's about ghosts, with
Yeah.
unfinished business.
So then, how do you have 5 ghosts with unfinished business that are different?
Mm-hmm.
Doing something together.
It's all kind of about your personal plot and stuff like that. Very much, so much more so as Wraith is a tormented soul.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's kind of this whole society thing, and it didn't really grab me. But your mileage may vary. If you can find a Wraith book, give it a look. Again, it's an intriguing system, and it's a very unique setting. They of course did Hunter the Reckoning, which was was just like it says on the tin, the people who hunted the supernatural and fought essentially for the sanctity of humanity. But they in and of themselves also had kind of some supernatural powers going on. This is, I think, where you can find characters whose, true faith is strong enough to drive back the vampires.
Yes.
And whatnot. And so isn't that kind of a supernatural power in and of itself? Doesn't that make you supernatural? Aren't you the thing you're hunting? There were some themes, definitely, of that.
Yes, definitely.
Then, very much towards the end of the World of Darkness, they came out with Demon the Fallen.
Yeah, I think this was getting us closer to
the actual Gehenna plot.
Gehenna plot, which they were preparing for, and Demon specifically, I think, was the first I'll use the term card being flipped for those of you who know what direction I'm taking on that one. And I think it was them kind of revealing what was to come.
Yep.
Without going too much further.
Someone finds a crack in the walls of hell.
Yeah.
And they peek their head out, fully expecting their head to be taken completely off by an avenging archangel who's guarding the gates, and no one is.
Yeah.
It's vacant.
Yeah.
And so they all just leave.
Yeah, and that's effectively what it is, but there's a lot more to that story than them just leaving.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And it basically closed up some of the loops that Hunter opens, because in Hunter there's explanations, there's little gaps that are left open of like, okay, what's going on with Archangel Michael, kind of a thing. And they're like, well, he's doing this, and you're like, okay, well, shouldn't he be watching the gates of hell? And then you find out in Demon, no
one is. No one knows where Lucifer is. No one's heard from God. No one knows where the angels are.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And so that kind of opened up a whole other realm of like demons going, like even demons saying like, this isn't like party day. This is really weird.
Yeah, this is really weird. And like even some demons who were like went to hell and like honest to goodness repented and were like, no, what we did was kind of messed up and I kind of want to get back into God's good graces, but God's not home. He's not picking up the phone. I can't even find any of his intermediaries. What do we do?
No forwarding addresses or anything. Like, how the hell am I going to handle this?
I mean, obviously you do have some demons who are like, let's ruin everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, that was your choice. That was your character choice. There was all sorts of philosophies that came out of these demons that were like, no, we used to be angels. We should get back to that.
Yeah.
If we're not going to be stuck in hell anymore, we've got work to do.
Right. And then Mummy came after that. Mummy the Resurrection.
I never played Mummy. I
didn't even crack the book of Mummy. So I don't know what they encapsulated in Mummy, but from what I know, Mummy basically talked about the beginning being the end. Mm-hmm. So there were things that, like, much like the antediluvians in Vampire in the first book, where they knew truths and facts.
They were there at the beginning.
Right. So by knowing the beginning, you kind of have a view of the end.
Right.
And so in that, you now have these people who basically were around way longer and were able to, who were mortals in some cases, not just and became gods, that then became omniscient in their own, who basically said, this is coming. We know what's coming. It's only going to get worse.
Yep.
And you have no idea. Like you know how like when you're doing a scratch off and you see those first things and you get excited? Like they're like, you haven't even gotten to the first thing to see to get excited.
Right.
Like you think you might win, but what's coming is no clue. So
Knox in the Box in the live chat is asking, is this Dogma? In reference to the Demon the Fallen? And what I will say is this, is I've never actually played the game. I bought the book, and I could never get a group together for it. But what I will say is, if you liked Dogma, and you thought they should have done more with the themes of angels and, all that jazz, and you want to explore that more, Demon might be a good game to look out.
I will say this. If you like Dogma, but you're not a Catholic who... If you were raised Catholic and know histories on saints and angels and seraphim in general, you will really enjoy it. If you have a divinity to it and a belief structure that's strong, you may actually get upset at how they depict things in the book.
That's fair.
Because
that's fair.
There is, I mean, for lack of a better term, there's some blasphemous content that is in it because they had to take graces to make a story.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
No different than if you didn't like, why am I losing this one? The Tom Hanks movie and book series.
Yeah, God, now I can't think of it.
With Angels and Demons is the second one. Angels and Demons went into it in more detail. But the Da Vinci Code.
Da Vinci Code, thank you.
So if you explored all of the Da Vinci Code, there was a point in there where you were like, what? No. Not at all. Like, that's not how any of that... But it's a story.
But understand, it's a fictional story.
Constantine does the same thing.
It's a big what-if that's taken with... takes a lot of liberties with it. It's not canon. Nobody says this is the basis of a faith or anything like that. It's a story.
Correct. So step into it with knowing that if you have some experience in it, there are definite things, not unlike 7th Sea with the way that it brings myth into the realm. It does explore those things and pushes them a little bit further. So, like, yeah, you probably could say that, if you were thinking of a certain person or a certain angel or a certain demon, they're probably in there. Mm-hmm. And there's probably a heavy discussion about them in there.
Yeah.
So
then New World of Darkness, the Chronicles of Darkness came around. We've got Vampire, Werewolf, Mage, Changeling all came back. Wraith did not. But in its place, we've got Promethean the Created. That is... I didn't really check that out, but I read a little bit about it.
Yeah.
I know you're kind of rolling your eyes a little bit.
Well, we're starting to step away from things, and that's where my brain was like, eh.
Yeah, so Promethean the Created is all about... basically soulless people who have like the spark of life inside them, but no real, like, they weren't born, they were created from this Promethean flame.
Yes. And there's some neat stuff in there, but like anyways.
Again, I don't know. I don't have an opinion on it because I
Right.
have never played it.
Right.
It could be very compelling. I don't know.
Changeling the Lost.
Changeling the Lost, which actually flips the script on Changeling.
100%.
Instead of playing the fairies, you play the mortals that were stolen by the fairies.
Yes.
And escaped their realm.
Right. A good example of this, if you're in Arthurian legends and lore, I believe the tale of not Galahad,
Gawain.
Gawain, the Green Knight, was a story of a lost because he got away.
Yep.
And to a degree had problems because of that. But that's a perfect example of it.
Yep. So Hunter makes a resurgence. You got Hunter the Vigil now.
Yep.
Geist, the Sin Eaters. Again, another thing I never got into, didn't look into it much. Apparently these were people, I believe, like, that were going to die or something like that, and made some deal with some extra entity that brought them back to life. But now they've got this other thing kind of hanging on that...
if I remember correctly, there's some demon stuff involved in that as well.
Okay. So. You've got Mummy the Curse.
Right.
Demon the Descent.
Which was an extension of it.
So those two come back, and then we've got Beast the Primordial. And I'm not...
I never even touched that book, so I'm not
familiar with it at all. So.
Yeah, so.
But you see, you've got a lot of... But again, all of these things are meant to play together. So you've got a lot of options.
Yeah. But a general feel. Yeah. On both worlds... In one, you have the direct feel of an end of a world, or a coming end of the world. You have it very character-driven. Excuse me again. Too much drinking. Very character-driven. Very character abounding, where you have these deep, rich character developments that push your character toward and balanced on a knife's edge, if you will, on a day-to-day basis. Whether it's your humanity, whether it's your honor, whether it's your paradox,
your rage.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you then have this this image of where things are going. And then on the other side of that, instead of it being an image of where things are going, it was where things happened and what we have now.
Yep.
So, yeah.
You want to get to some questions? I know we've gone really late.
No, I again, late is relative for us.
Yeah,
I would love to hit some questions.
This is going to be a big episode.
No, I think it's good. We're going to go for a little while longer because we've got some really good questions from people, specifically about World of Darkness. We're going to hold some other questions that we've got in here for another show, but we're going to get through the World of Darkness questions that we've got in here that I think are really, really good.
All right, why don't you get started then? You see something there's
yeah, let's start with the basic one.
Okay.
The Mad Elf asked us, what was our favorite support or supplement book for World of Darkness?
Oh, I mean, I was always a big fan of the clan books for Vampire.
What was your favorite clan?
I played Malkavian almost exclusively.
I can understand that.
And I'll tell you why.
Sure.
Actually, because I saw so many bad Malkavians being played that it was very much an interest of I like a more psychological style of horror personally, but also nobody else is going to do it right if I don't do it. So Malkavians are vampires who are inherently insane. Literally, the embrace. Their bloodline carries madness with it, so even if you weren't technically crazy before you were embraced, you go crazy either during or shortly after you are turned into a vampire.
Right.
And it's all unique. Like, it's not like, if the guy who bites you is schizophrenic, you turn into a schizophrenic too. It's not as simple as that. It's just that your brain fractures in some way. Mm-hmm. And it's incurable. Mm-hmm. You will, as a Malkavian, you will always be flawed mentally in some way. Mm-hmm. You'll always carry that with you. And so, I played a character that was deeply schizophrenic, and played this character at a LARP. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, I checked out a bunch of like psychology books on like. How it, what the different symptoms of it are, and, what certain stress levels will do to people and such like that, and common ways that it will express itself. And then proceeded over the next couple of months to have people stop play with me to ask me if I was legitimately all right, because I was role-playing it so well.
Yep. I think the Malk that I once played, which I brought up on the show, was one of the ways I role played it, which was outside of the story, was that he just believed he was an angel. Mm-hmm. That was it. He honestly believed he was an angel and that he had wings.
He was just delusional.
And he was just delusional. Just that simple. He was honorable. He was caring. He was everything that really a vampire wasn't. But crazy that he believed he was an angel.
Yeah.
That was it. Simple as that.
But overall, to get back to the question, though, the source books for each of the individual clans, I thought did a really good job of fleshing out the clan.
Very much
telling
so.
a lot of its stories, a lot of its people, a lot of its motivations and stuff like that. And I always felt a lot better about a clan once I read its clan book than I did just reading the one-page description in the main book.
Without a doubt. For me, I will say Dark Ages. I loved Dark Ages.
Oh,
I thought
yeah.
It was,
yeah.
I thought it was beautiful, that it was deep. I thought it did a great job of explaining what things were like for them and kept the setting and feel.
Putting the goth back in gothic horror.
Exactly. Like true goth, if you will. So I would say that if I was to go back, I would go and play that. But I loved the feel. It was just fun. Mm-hmm. Like hearing about crusaders who weren't necessarily divine. They were vampires, but still doing their job.
But yeah, still doing God's work, because of course they are, you know?
Like, this doesn't change me.
Yeah. This just gives me more power and an eternity to do this.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right, grab another one.
All right, so Technolich asks, let's see here. I'm trying to find World of Darkness related ones.
Do you want to jump to Nox?
Yeah. Certain games. I think we answered, do certain games have specific tones and storytelling styles?
I think, I would say that, just to kind of come back on that one, yes, each one of the settings within World of Darkness set its own tone of how things were going. But in the end, I think that White Wolf as a whole has a world setting of things breaking down and you trying to manage yourself within it.
Yeah.
That's really the setting.
Imagine
And tone.
To give you a metaphor for the White Wolf, for the World of Darkness. Imagine driving around that car where every week something new is going to break on it. You don't know if it's going to be the radiator. You don't know if it's going to be a flat tire. You don't know if it's going to be, your exhaust or whatever is going to drop out the bottom. But you know that car is falling apart, and you know it's a matter of time. And there's only so much Bondo and duct tape and bungee cords you can slap on that thing to keep it running before it finally gives up the ghost. Now imagine that car is your entire world. And that's really the feel. Is things are falling apart, and you're just, whatever genre you're playing, you're trying to do your best. But individual games, though, like I said, have their own theme to them. Vampire, of course, you've got the struggle against your own humanity. Are you going to give in to the beast within?
Yeah.
And along with that, even if you are trying to be the do-gooder, you're surrounded by other monsters. And so how much good can you do when you're the only one in the room doing the good?
Right. Now, how much killing justice is justice or vengeance?
Exactly. Then you've got Werewolf. Werewolf actually had a really great setting to it because you were supposed to be these great, honorable, powerful protectors of the wild. But there's also supposed to be a balance between the wild, the worm, and the weaver. Yeah. Which is the worm being the force of corruption, the weaver being the force of creation, which is like the advance of technology and such like that.
Right.
And the wild being what you expect it to be, the wilderness, the force of life.
Right.
Somewhere along the way, the weaver drove the worm insane, and the worm started just destroying things. It was no longer entropy and the eventual decay of things. It just started turning into destruction and corruption, and that threw all of the balance off. And so the werewolves all had this big meeting, and there was this powerful seer who could see the future, and came back with this prophecy that said there's going to be this great battle against the worm, and we lose.
Yeah.
And what do you do with that? Like, that's the beginning of the story, is we know in the end, when the big fight comes, we lose.
Right. So
what do you do?
Do you say, no, I'm going to still fight, and we could win? Or do you say, screw it?
Yeah. Do you just give in?
Yeah.
And give up and join
give
the bad guys?
Yeah.
So that's the theme behind Werewolf. Mage, you are these warpers of reality. You can literally change reality at your fingertips, and it's about the wonder of creation. But at the same time, though, the general populace doesn't accept that and actively fights back against it.
But there's something more powerful than you out there.
Right.
Doing the same thing.
There are other factions that are essentially trying to make reality less malleable so that they can dictate what it is.
What reality is. Yep.
They can write the rules on it, essentially, so that reality itself will no longer be changeable. And so, that's the thing there is, like, how malleable is reality when you've got it constantly pushing back against you,
Yeah.
Changeling, like I described earlier, is all about dreams, and you live in the Summerlands, but in a very almost Song of Fire and Ice way, winter is coming.
Yeah.
And when I say winter, I don't mean a cold period. I mean the death of invention, the death of dreams, the death of wonder.
Well, and they even bring up, like, there's a great thing in when they did Dark Ages that kind of spilled into Changeling, that talked about the time of loss. And they referred to it as something else in Changeling, but effectively it was during the Dark Ages when all kinds of knowledge was lost and people were basically dying. There was plague. There was all kinds of stuff stacked on top of it, and nobody wanted to create. Nobody did anything.
Yeah,
and all dreams. You had were these little you had nothing but nightmares, and you had these little fires of light that were out there in the wilderness. That was art, creation, and things. And sometimes those fires were not where you thought they were coming from.
Yeah.
They were coming from dark places trying to bring it out. And they saw the future where those lights don't exist. And it was like, uh-oh. Like when all the stars go out at night.
Yeah.
the darkness creeps in.
Where will
completely.
our refuge be?
Right.
Nox is saying that's too soul crushing for me to consider playing right now.
I'm with you.
You're not wrong.
Yep.
It does take a certain group. It takes a certain mood. You know?
Yep. Totally.
It takes a desire to want to explore these darker themes and eke out your victories against impending doom.
Exactly.
And that's really, I think, where the big appeal of all this comes from.
Right.
Is finding your small victories when you know the end result is going to be loss.
Do we want to try and tackle Overwatch's question?
Let's see here. Yeah.
Because we talked about this last night.
Yeah, how do you balance a truly open-ended magic system like Mage the Ascension while still encouraging creativity and player agency? I think we mentioned it earlier. It's really all about how bad you can be as your storyteller.
Yeah, I think Mage specifically is a system that speaks to people who are very creative.
So, just to give a quick rundown of kind of where this question's coming from, for those of you who are not familiar with the Mage magic system. So, when we say magic system, a lot of times people go directly to D&D, because that's their first and only reference to magic, where you've got codified spells like Fireball and Cone of Cold and Teleport that all do very specific things in very specific ways, at very specific, say, levels. Okay? Mage doesn't have any of that. Mage has 9 spheres? Something like that. 9-ish. Maybe it might be 10 or 11. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Spheres of influence, essentially. Okay? And these are things like forces. And that's things like heat and light and momentum. Okay? But that's it. That's just heat or light or momentum or whatever else. If it's a physical, like in the physics sense of the term, a force, that's what it controls. There's things like life that has to do with the physical embodiment of living things.
Right.
There's things like entropy that has to do with chance and things falling apart.
Yeah.
So each one of these spheres has 5 ranks to it. You may have no ranks in a sphere. You may have up to 5, which is incredibly difficult to do, which makes you essentially a godlike master of that particular sphere.
Correct.
So, Mage's entire magic system is built around, I don't know, what do you want to do? What can you do?
Right.
Within your certain spheres?
How much can you hold your control over a situation and as the character and be able to explain your will over something in a plausible way?
Right. So if you want to throw a fireball,
right.
Okay, fire is a force, it's heat. Okay, so that requires, and you look up forces, and you see what it requires to evoke a certain amount of fire. Okay, say that's forces 3.
Right.
Okay, now, are you pulling this fire from an existing source, or are you creating it from your own magic?
Right.
Okay, if you're creating from your own magic, you're going to also need rank 2 in quintessence. Or in prime, I'm sorry. In prime. Which is the flow of quintessence, the mere potential of creation.
Correct.
Okay. Then, if you're trying to say, there might be other things that go into it.
Is it raining?
Well, not even is it raining, but just from the standpoint of how do you create a fireball?
Creating it, yeah.
So, are you just going to whip a fireball out there? Because reality's going to have a few things to say about that. Or are you going to throw some extra stuff in there to try and make it look coincidental? Are you going to try to make it appear from a local gas main?
Right.
So that it looks like, it was just a gas explosion. Well, projecting it from something other than yourself might require some correspondence to make it to cross space between you and where you want it to appear.
Right.
Et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so you look at what tools you have in place, and you say, with the tools I have at hand, can I make the thing that I'm going to literally just describe off the top of my head actually happen? And so, obviously, as a storyteller, this makes it a little bit of a headache, because unlike Fireball, which I can look up as a 3rd level wizard spell, and know exactly that it's going to do 8d6 damage in a 20-foot radius, I don't know at any given moment what the hell my players are going to pull out of their respective orifices and try to pass off as an effect from their mage. And so it gets a little bit tricky real darn quick. And so to the question, with all that explanation behind us, and I'm so sorry for that it went on so long, but it required some context.
It was necessary.
How do you balance a truly open-ended magic system like Mage while still encouraging creativity and player agency? I think the biggest thing you have to lean into, and we've said it before, is be a fan of your players.
Without a doubt.
If your players are going to be creative, and they're going to look at a bunch of disparate puzzle pieces and say, "Oh shit, I know what I can make out of this,"
Right,
and pull something fantastic out of their minds and put it in front of you, they should by all means be allowed to do the job.
I would say, as much as D&D is a system against the players, and as much as 7th Sea is a system where you're riding along with the players, I honestly want to say that World of Darkness is a system where you're almost supporting the players.
Yeah.
Because the chances of them not succeeding are so high, and the problems that they have to deal with just to try and get through the system to enjoy the story will create enough struggle for them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
it is so different in that aspect.
It's like the storyteller doesn't need to be against the players because the setting already is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, by all means, if they do something creative, lean into it.
Yeah.
Lean into it. Let them have it, because
Yeah.
the next technocracy hit mark or
Next time the Sabbat comes around the corner and burns something.
Like, there's always more. Like, there's always more horribleness. Let them have a victory or two.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, if you really are leaning into the darkness in the World of Darkness,
Right.
letting them have that bright moment of victory makes it all the more sweet when you snatch it away from them.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it.
Yep.
I think that's a great way of putting it. Anything else we want to hit?
Let's see here.
I mean, Matt Elf's got this interesting thing that kind of goes kind of deep.
Throw it at me. What do we got?
World of Darkness is a setting where each game is hypothetically part of the same world. Assuming a game where players can build characters from one or more of the individual games, how do you help players promote group unity when one of the underlying premises of the game is fractional conflict, both within individual game and between the games? Vampires and werewolves and mages, oh my. I think in the original story, I remember playing games where we had vampires and werewolves and mages in the same game.
Yeah, I ran
all
one like that
working
too.
toward a common goal. I think it is no different in that aspect than any other system. There are bonds that bring them together. Those bonds have to be created by the players to each other of why they're bonded. And then through those bonds, they work on a common goal. And that basically pulls the knot closer together.
Yeah, I think especially if you're going to go, very disparate, like a werewolf and a vampire who are supposed to be sworn enemies. Vampires being agents of the worm, vampires being of the worm, and werewolves being of the wild. They're arch nemeses and supposed to be shredded upon contact. If you are going to stick even like opposing forces like that into the same group, it's very important as a storyteller to find a common enemy that is greater than any animosity between the two of them.
Correct.
And make it mutually beneficial for them to join up and destroy that.
Yeah. I mean, there are things you can do where basically one of the ones that I thought was really well done was that all of the players were already friends to start with. They all went to the same high school or college together. They hung out together, and then they were told, then they were created into what they were. They became a vampire. They came out as a werewolf. They came into being of a mage because they had been kind of working on it in secret, and now it's a truth. And then now they're all discovering that they're not supposed to like each other, and that's a problem.
The werewolf jumps down to eviscerate the vampire, and just as he's about to sink his fangs in, goes, "John?"
Yeah, it's the Deadpool moment.
Carol?
Yeah.
What
are you doing here? Oh, jeez.
Oh my God! What? I haven't seen you in forever. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could definitely do that. I also think like the setting itself, if you're just following the main books and such like that, does a pretty good job of giving you some like darker common enemies. There are deeper shadows that go bumpier in the night than you do. So like Pentex comes to mind, evil corporation essentially that's trying to bring about the end of the world and whatnot like that. That are horrors that if one such popped up, it would be in everybody's best interest to try to take this thing out for the continued preservation of everybody. Then you can get back to your petty squabbles later, but that thing needs to die now. And I know that's kind of where my plot usually went when I try to do crossover games. But admittedly, crossover games are very difficult. They very much are difficult. He's right. You've got a lot to worry about just even when you're running all vampires. Let alone worrying about trying to cross over and justify why a vampire and a werewolf haven't killed each other yet. So, there's a lot to discuss here.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we did a lot.
Yeah.
At the same time, and I think we did justice.
Yeah. But at the same time, please understand we've barely scratched the surface here.
Yeah, and my closing thought on it is a fun system. Mm-hmm. Classic or the new.
Yeah.
If you're interested in a world where you're heavily embedded with the characters, and in honestly, even the classic, character creation is not that challenging.
No, it really isn't. It
is in depth. There are degrees beyond simple character creation you can go with people, but not even to the extent of needing other things. They merely help you define better. Like, in just the base vampire book, you can do a lot.
Oh, sure. But oftentimes I didn't even use the expansion supplements or splat books or whatever you call them.
If you grabbed the additional books, the splat books, and go into one of the clans, you can gain a lot more. But remember, you're going to be creating a story that is relatively simple in a world that is exceptionally challenging for your players. And you're going to be there to help them through the darkness and through those roles and see where those struggles lead. Yeah. It is going to be heavy on your players.
It is. It's a very heavy system, and oftentimes, like, I personally don't have the spoons for it a lot of times.
It's emotionally heavy. Not system heavy, not otherwise.
But there are some people who find that very therapeutic.
Yep.
Because you can work through some heavy stuff like that at the table and tell some pretty dark stories to, and maybe your whole life looks a lot lighter after you're done telling that story. I'm not personally one of those, but I know people like that, and absolutely, I encourage you to give it a look if a darker style of story is what you're looking for. So
I think that's perfect.
All right.
Let me see if I can get this music started up for us.
Alrighty. So next week's topic, we're going to be talking. We've talked a lot about how to begin games, how to play games, but we really don't talk a lot about the end of games. So when do you or should you end your game? And it's game session, game campaign. What's the time, the moment, the plot beat? How do we bring it all to a close? So you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. You can listen to us live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And please join us on Discord. You can find that link up on our Twitter, as well as up on our website at storyteller-conclave.blueberry, that's BLUBRRY.net.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members, Knox, Sam, and the Arcane Asylum especially, and the rest of you who help us with every month. It helps us ever so much, and we would love to have you join us so we can celebrate with you as well online. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrogmusic.weebly.com. Our outro music, Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine, is what you're hearing right now. You can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachine/tracks.
Give a big shout out as always to our families.
Yeah, happy birthday, Sean.
Happy birthday, Sean.
I hope you're enjoying your time, and she will be there soon.
I'm going to make you so much ice cream when I get home.
Oh, man, that sounds good.
All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables over the years, and you, every single one of our listeners, we love you. Stay healthy and safe.
Please stay healthy and safe, especially right now. And have a wonderful night.